You're up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last hearing, I entered into the record an effort to protect the ban on government-controlled interstate rest areas. I know that some of our witnesses, I understand that Mr. Poole probably disagrees with this position, but it's one that we felt pretty strongly about. I want to enter into the record this time. It's a similar letter. It's signed by stakeholders that we all know, such as the National League of Cities, the National Restaurant Association, the Energy Marketers of America, and a lot of others, which talks about the value of the private sector investment across the nation's highway network. And I think the rest stops would give the government, if they were government controlled, an unfair monopoly. And so this lesson, this letter is one that covers that.
Without objection.
And I want to have that as a part of the record. It's kind of interesting, the ones, I think he's gone now, but Ben Cardin and I were both elected the same year, 1986, and we've been dealing with all these highway bills ever since that time. So we have a lot of seniority on this issue. And one of the interesting things I always like to point out to my friends and my witnesses at such hearings as this, most of them are too young to remember this, but I remember when the biggest problem we had in the Highway Trust Fund is we had too much surplus. And so everyone was trying to rob the surplus. Well, one of the worst offenders of that was Bill Clinton. And he actually took, I can't remember how many $1 billion was out of that, and it took me about 2 years to get it all back in, anticipating that we'd have the problems that we're having today. And one of the unique things about this is this is a program that everyone agrees with. I can remember a lot of the Republicans that were going to be running for president a few years ago were trying to each one be the most conservative, more conservative. And one of our people went back, actually, it was one of the candidates from, I shouldn't say this, but from Kentucky. And he got up there, and all the transportation people jumped all over him. You're running for president here, and we don't want. And he said, "Oh, I wasn't talking about transportation." You see, we have that benefit that people all fall into agreement that we want to have that system. So anyway, I was glad. This is the first time that I've heard that all of our witnesses came in agreement, knowing that there should be a user pay concept. And I've been saying this when it was very unpopular to say this, and now I think it's more popular than it was at that time. So I think we're making some headway in this area. I'd like to make sure that there's no one here. What we all agree is we do need a long-term highway bill to give the states the fundamental, the certainty and the predictability. And I would assume if there's any of our 5 witnesses who don't agree with that, say so now, because I believe that is a concept that we all agree in. And I think also the fact that we are now looking at something on the electric vehicles, I'm paying their fair share, and I'm just rejoiced in the fact that people are talking about that now, and it is popular, and it is very fair. Now, Mr. Schenkel, I understand that nearly 30 states have passed electric vehicle fees to help pay for the roadway. Now, I'd like to have you elaborate a little bit on, have these revenues been used to invest in roads and bridges? Have they been successful? We're looking at this right now in our state of Oklahoma. And so I'd like to have you explore that a little bit on what has been workable in the past.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator Inhofe. Yeah, so it's 28 states have enacted fees on electric vehicles and 14 on hybrid vehicles. That money is, except for 3 states, that money is pretty much going into transportation projects. Sometimes transportation projects are a little more maybe broadly defined to include a little bit of electric charging stations and things like that. But generally, for the most part, that money is going into the state fund that pays for transportation there. given that no state, I don't believe, has more than 2%, or I think even at the most of their personal vehicle fleet that is electric vehicles, the amount of money thus far isn't really substantial. Now that's going to start to change, and it's going to become more important in the next. I think every year it's going to become more important, frankly, next, especially within 5 to 10 years, is that kind of bridge until we do figure out if are we moving to a ruck or what are we going to do. But the short answer is some way there's not necessarily a lot of money there.
Mm,
It's really more of a equity kind of concern at this point, that there's a group of vehicle owners in many cases, which tend to be, but not always, or are higher income, that weren't paying to be part of the system at a time when the system needs more money in. And so that was a lot of the
mhm,
rationale behind that. And I'm happy to provide more information on how the states have exactly been spending that money
mhm.
in the follow-up testimony. But it is mostly for state transportation projects, maintenance and
Yeah, and I
operation and
think
what
for
have
the
you.
record, any elaboration on that you can get, that'd be very helpful to us. And I think this hearing's been very, very helpful. The question that we get, one of the differences between witnesses and people sitting at this table is you guys don't have to run for election. And so the first thing when we hear a VMT system or one of these other systems, the first thing that comes to me is the questions that people are always asked. When we talk about this publicly, the only question they have is, how much is it going to cost me? Anyone have a good idea and a good answer for that question? No, I didn't think so. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.